Hi guys, it is April from Getting Huggo With It. Today I wanted to share with you the books that I have read in 2018 about resilience. This was such an important thing to me this year. After my miscarriage, I wanted to read about resilience and, surround myself essentially with people that I could look up to who made it through hard things. And I found some real gems and I want to share them with you here. So let's get into it. So I started off 2018 reading Memoirs of a Geisha, and this, I was so glad, was such a wonderful story of resilience. This is about a little girl in Japan who is born to very poor people. Her mother is on her deathbed. Her father can't take care of her anymore. And she and her sister are sold. And she is sold to go into a home where she will be taught the art of becoming a geisha, and her sister is sold somewhere else. And it is her journey of becoming a geisha and the loneliness that surrounds her in her life. She really has to rely on herself, and she's a little girl when this starts. I mean, I think, was she about seven or 8 when the book begins, and we follow her into her adulthood, and I really admired her for being able to find some way of centering herself even when horrible things are happening. This really is about resilience. It is, she is faced with heartbreak and bullying. Oh my gosh, there's a geisha in here that bullies her to an insane degree, and it was really hard to read sometimes because you're just rooting for our main character so much. I've forgotten her name because her name changes. I think it changed like 3 times throughout the book, and so I can't remember her name. But I really, really loved her, and I so highly recommend Memoirs of a Geisha. I was really surprised that it was written by a man. This author was really able to get into the mindset of a woman, and I was blown away by that. So I so recommend Memoirs of a Geisha. I've got a few nonfiction here as I throw it on the ground. First, I want to talk to you about The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. This is nonfiction about Jeanette Walls and her childhood. She was also a very poor young girl. She had, I think, was it 3 brothers and sisters, I want to say, and her parents were incredibly eccentric. Her dad was meant to be this genius engineer who was going to build a glass castle for them, but he couldn't hold down a job, or he wouldn't, like he would just walk off of the job all the time. Her mom was an artist and was a teacher as well. And she too would just walk off a job, just didn't want to work. And that left the children to fend for themselves a lot of the time. In some cases, we're following these kids as they are picking through the garbage to find lunches that other kids have thrown away to survive. Sometimes you find them eating margarine. It was infuriating. So much of the time this was infuriating because as someone who wants to be a parent so badly, it was so hard to read about parents who were really neglecting their children. Also, they were put in so much danger, and so many of them got so injured because of the neglect, including Jeanette Walls herself. And I was so shocked. But what I was amazed by was Jeanette Walls and her resilience. So you watch her throughout the course of her childhood and into her adulthood. You watch her blossom, and you watch her realize that her parents aren't to be put on a pedestal, and that she needs to start relying on herself. Even as a girl, she slowly begins to realize if she's going to survive and make a different life for herself, she has to rely on herself. And it's something that happens over time, and that's something that I learned this year, is that resilience really isn't something you wake up and implement into your life. It is not a mindset. It is something that you practice throughout your life, and you're going to stumble and fall, and you're going to grow. And it was amazing to watch her grow into the brilliant woman that she became. So I loved reading The Glass Castle. 5 stars, just beautiful. I will read anything Jeanette Walls writes after that. Yes. Another book I wanted to talk to you about is The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill. This is Canadian fiction, which makes me very happy. I need to read more Canadian fiction as a Canadian. And I loved this book. In this book, we're following Aminata, and she is a Black little girl living in South Africa with her wonderful parents. And she is one day literally kidnapped and put on a slave ship and sent to America. And it's her story. We follow her in Africa, in the southern states. We follow her in New York. We follow her in Canada. We follow her in England. She really travels the whole world in this book, and she taps into her own strength somehow. She does meet some wonderful, wonderful characters, wonderful people who lift her up, which is so nice to see. But she also meets some awful people, truly awful people. And she has to rely on herself. Luckily, she has the upbringing that she had from her parents, who taught her that she is loved and taught her certain skills that helped. Her mother was a midwife, and she learned how to become a midwife, and that saved her quite literally several times throughout her life, because she was so useful and resourceful for so many slave owners. And so she was literally saved by her own skills. And I just loved seeing her strength and her determination to find freedom. I really admired Aminata. And even at the very beginning of this book, we're meeting her in England, and she's an elderly woman at this point, and she's surrounded by abolitionists, and she's talking about her life, and she's also got this humor and a bit of sass, and like, just, she knows her own worth, and I just adored her. If you haven't read this book yet, I so highly recommend that you do. It was really enlightening to me. I really, really loved that. Another book, another nonfiction book I want to talk to you about is I Am by Maggie O'Farrell. I had never read Maggie O'Farrell before, and I was pleasantly surprised. In this book, we are literally following her 19 brushes with death, or is it 17? I can't remember. I don't have the book here. I lent it to a friend. I've got to get that back soon. But she had 19 brushes with death. Like, she actually experienced that. How many of us can say that we have had that many experiences like that? Some of them are from her childhood, illnesses in her childhood. Some of them are absolutely petrifying. The first story gave me chills because I was scared for her. Even though you know that she's alive because she's written the book, I was genuinely scared for her because she meets someone who he really could have killed her. The most meaningful chapter to me was when Maggie talks about the missed miscarriage that she had, and all of the thoughts that she had after it. I also had a missed miscarriage, and it's very strange when you have one of those because you are literally walking around thinking that you're pregnant. You're feeling sick still, everything is normal, and then you go in for an ultrasound and they're like, no, the baby's dead. And it's the worst feeling in the world. And you have so many questions that you're left with, and you're left with a lot of anger. And she was able to showcase that and explain it to me in a way that made me feel known and not so alone. And I mean, 19 brushes with death, or 17, whatever the number is, that's in the teens. You can't get much more resilient than that. She's still going. She's still going. And she's still writing. And I loved that book. And the last book that I want to share with you is so lovely. I read it earlier in the year. And it's Hum If You Don't Know the Words by Bianca Marais. I also think that this might be Canadian literature. I follow her on Instagram, and I think she lives in Toronto, so I think this might be Canadian, which makes me very proud because, wow, this girl can write. I will be happy to read more of her stuff, that's for sure. In this book, we're following two people. We follow a little girl named Robin in South Africa. I think it takes place in the 70s. It takes place during apartheid. So she's a little white girl. Her parents die very suddenly and she's orphaned, and she goes to live with an aunt, and it is about her journey with that. We're also meeting Beauty, who's a Black woman whose daughter has gone missing, and she is trying to find her. And these two storylines, slowly through the story, they meet. And I thought Beauty just was resilience and determination, obviously, to find her daughter, to save her daughter. But she was such a resilient woman and gave Robin strength, and a strength that Robin didn't have because she's just a little kid, you know, trying to work through the world. And I just loved those two together. I feel like they both gave each other things that they needed and became resilient people because of that. And I adored both of those characters. I honestly am so sad that I won't meet these characters again. Like, maybe she'll do a second book that follows them more on their lives. But I just felt very tied to these characters in a way that I don't come by very often. So if you like to feel a real connection with your characters, oh my goodness, you will fall in love with Robin and Beauty. Absolutely. So those are the books that I really felt embodied resilience this year that I've read. I read a few more, but those ones were like the showstoppers to me. So I hope that you guys are doing well. Let me know in the comments below if you know any books about resilience. I would love your suggestions. It's still something I'm really fascinated by. Strength is something that takes some working, some training, some strength training. So I'd love your suggestions, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye guys.